Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm here today with Nicholas Cope. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Hello, Debbie. Thank you.
Well, the reason we're doing this show today is because I saw one of Nicholas Cope's Facebook posts, and I immediately got in touch with him and said, this is the kind of thing I like to talk about. So I'm going to start with reading Nicholas's post from 6 days ago. So you wrote, I heard on the radio this morning that this lockdown in England prevents us from being human and doing normal human things. I disagree. This should be another opportunity to contemplate what being human really means and to realize and experience it inwardly. Our culture elevates activity or agitation for the sake of it because that's what we think we should be doing. In any normal culture, this is not the case. Over to you, Nick. That was fantastic. Really got me thinking that day.
Yeah, well, what can I say about that? Yeah, I'd like you to read that again, but no, maybe not. I'm very interested in the whole idea of kind of what is normal and what is not normal. And, the world is obviously kind of, it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody watching this, that the world out there is really not normal. We're not kind of experiencing things in a normal way either. But also I'd go further and say that in a way, the world has always been the way it is. There's always change. There's always discordancy. That's the nature of the material world. But I believe that our perspective is abnormal. The way we look at things is very limited. Our horizon, especially of modern mankind, and in particular the European mentality, which would include America as well, is extremely limited. Our horizons have become very limited, and I relate that. My other work is I'm an artist, and I've written a book on ancient geometry in a place in Scotland. It's too much to go into now, but
We have
ancient
covered it in a past show, so we can always go back and look at the other shows we've done together.
Yes. I believe that kind of we're so much diminished people now because of our perspectives. And, I don't believe it's always been that case, and there are reasons why that's happened. Most of it will be quite shocking to people, but I don't believe there's any great conspiracy. I just think it's the natural order of things in cycles. You can reach an apex and then you come down to the nadir. And at the moment, our whole civilization is at the bottommost point that we can possibly imagine. I can't imagine anything becoming more detached from reality or any kind of spirituality than we are now. So, that post I put up, I always put up a little kind of quote, usually with my artwork. And my artwork is something that kind of expresses kind of I suppose you could call them beliefs, for want of a better word. It has to be a subjective thing, because there would be a lot of people out there who might disagree. That's up to them. That's absolutely fine. So at the end of this talk presentation thing, I'm going to show some examples of my work and describe what I'm trying to achieve with them.
Oh, I look forward to that. I always liked your work. We did an article about it for Hermes magazine, if anyone wants to see any more. The interview we did on that, of what your art represents to you and what you're putting across. But you were saying that you feel that we're down. If we look up and down. So why have we got to this down point? What's happened?
Well, partly it's just natural. It's the actual plan. That's how things should be. Things are born, things grow, they live, they decrease and they diminish, and then they die. Civilizations and people as well, and modes of thought as well. My perspective is, like I said about my work on ancient civilizations, is that also I'm very interested in the Kali, the Hindu Manvantaras. There's a lot of information in ancient Hinduism, well, it's still current Hinduism, that gives a lot of insight into these ideas, because the whole point of the Manvantaras is that there's 4 ages. The first age, don't ask me what they're called, but
In this Iron Age. golden
Yeah.
age? We're now in the Kali.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, when you say Iron Age, it doesn't relate to what we consider the Iron Age to be.
Yeah.
Because the last age, the Kali Yuga age, goes back to prehistory when it started. I mean, you know, several thousand years BC, probably that started. Although these things are not definite. But I do believe that things grow, they live and they die. And, you know, and so do perspectives. So our perspective now is, well, one perspective of that is that we're at the end of our cycle and we're getting ready for the next cycle. Sorry, Debbie?
So is that the end of the Kali Yoga cycle, or are we going into the Kali Yoga cycle?
Well, no, we're kind of, a lot of people say we're coming towards the end of the Kali Yuga. The signs are there that we're at the end of it. But of course, that's not a pessimistic thing, because the end of the Kali Yuga means it's going to be the beginning of another age where things return slowly. Whether we'll see it in our lifetimes is another matter, because I mean, these things are vast. You know, we won't see any change from one day to the next. So, but I do believe that, you know, it's our perception of things which is degraded. Just like a plant growing, flowering, and then withering away. Our perception of things is at the status of a plant that's just withering, and we're not able to see. The reality is a very subjective word, but I'm going to use it because English is not really suitable for a lot of this conversation. So, but we have to use it. You know, we can't see reality for what it is, and what it is order and harmony, which is still there, but we just can't see it, and we make things disorderly, partly because of our perception of things.
Is that because we're building our modern world, so we're ignoring what's going on in the real world? We're not seeing.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about what the modern world is, the modern world may have existed for a few hundred years, but this is in the whole history of humanity, going back thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, possibly. So, you know, the fact that we think we're superior now, and we look on ancient people like we look on tribes somewhere, some native tribe somewhere, as being inferior. So we elevate ourselves because we have the arrogance of things like science, a rationalistic way of looking at the world, which is not normal. You know, it's absolutely not a normal way. I mean, again, normal is a word, an English word, but I hope you understand what I mean by that.
Living
I mean, there is a
harmoniously
normal way of looking at the world. Sorry, Debbie?
We should be living harmoniously with everything, but we're not.
Well, that's the way people have been since, well, up to a few hundred years ago, and increasingly so. I mean, look at I mean, the whole point, the nature of the Kali Yuga is that things speed up and things get more condensed. So things become, if you imagine the beginning as a sphere, which is the freest, if you like, form, and we're now becoming a cube, which is the most stable form. It's unmoving, it doesn't do anything but just sit there. So, you know, there's the whole perspective of relating the modern world to kind of what was before, the pre-modern kind of ideas. Although, again, that's a bit hazy. You know, English is not a very good language for this. English is a language made for shopkeepers. It's not a language to talk about metaphysical truths. You know, it's not an ancient language, it's a modern language. So we have to struggle with the language we use. So any words that people have a problem with, or they think I'm being a bit vague, is because English is vague. It's very vague language.
Yeah.
So
Steiner classes, we discuss this a lot about when they translate from German Steiner's work, and there's words we don't have in the English language for what he's trying to say. And I've also heard that about Arabic. There's words in their language that we don't have. So we can't understand perhaps some of what the great Arabic writers of the past were saying, or in their poetry or something, because we don't have the understanding of, well, maybe the understanding, but not a word to express that.
No, Arabic's interesting because, you know, I've studied Islamic pattern. I did an MA in Islamic pattern, and Arabic is a revealed language. which means it's descended from above. It's descended from spirit. So it wasn't original. It's not made up, and it's just not written down by a person. That's the idea. I mean, it may have been, but the whole point is that the symbolism of the Islamic language does not relate to the world as it is now. So it's kind of, I mean, my angle is to look at traditional cultures and to look at the way they perceived things, and the whole nature of a traditional culture is one of order. Everything about them was about order, whereas we see now the whole world is completely disordered in every possible way. The politics, everything. I mean, even to such an extent that we're destroying the world, which was an impossibility before modern times. People lived with the planet and lived with nature because they respected it. I mean, many cultures that have, well, sort of survived to now, certainly 100 or 200 years ago, the American natives, the Aboriginals, these are people that we should really learn from, because they're the last vestige of this holistic, and if you like, metaphysical way of looking at things, which is the reality. You know, we are descended from spirit. This is what we are as beings. We're not just material beings groping around in the mud, which is the way the world seems to have turned out for us. Or that's what we've created.
But isn't that because of this rational way of thinking that came in the last few hundred years of we need?
Yeah, we're being rational and just having science without any other perspective. I mean, there's nothing wrong with science, Debbie. It's brilliant for what it does, but it only does that much. You know, the world is so much more. And the biggest problem with scientists is that anything outside their parameters of understanding, so if they can't see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, it doesn't exist. And of course, metaphysics is beyond the senses, so you can't feel it, touch it. You can allude to it. You can understand that it is a possibility. That's as far as you can go with metaphysics. So, you know, modern science, we're kind of, this is part of the modern world. We're getting boxed into a much smaller box nowadays. I mean, the last few hundred years, and there are many stages of that, which is kind of way too complex to go into now. I want to talk generally about the principles of what it is to be human, and you know, the current culture that we live in does not allow us to be human beings in the way that we should be, in the way that human beings have understood for many thousands of years. So it's, you know, it's and the modern world is very short. You know, few hundred years means a lot to us as individuals, but like in the whole history of humanity, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing at all.
But it's done so much damage, I think, in that
massive
time.
Damage. I mean, yeah, I was watching on the TV about how many species of animals are going to be extinct in the next like 10 years, and how many have become extinct. And they were talking about since 1500, I think, which you would roughly say was the beginning of the modern world, 1600s, something like that. Renaissance was a big part of it, where it kind of reduced God to man. And, you know, since then we've become much more sentimental about things, because the ancient world saw things as symbolic. Everything had not just a practical purpose, but it had a metaphysical symbolism. So trying to think of an example, and many examples of that, but I'm sure we'll mention some.
Like even if you saw like a little spider crawl across the table in front of you in the olden days, that would have meant
that would have a significance to people. Yeah, absolutely. And now we want to just get it out of our homes, maybe.
Yes, and that is one of the big problems I find with people, and has been forever. And you know, since I was a teenager, I used to be all up for saving the environment and things, but people don't seem to be concerned about living with the animals, the wildlife, the nature. They want, it's like humanity wants to take it over and control it.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the modern mentality that wants to do that. I mean, people haven't always been like that, Debbie. You know, the Native Americans weren't like that. The ancient Egyptians weren't like that. They had a truly metaphysical way of perceiving the world, which relative to the way we see the world in our little tiny box, is much more all-embracing about what is actually going on. You know, they didn't have what we would call a rational scientific mode of thought at all. But that doesn't mean they were inferior. This is a whole problem with the modern idea of progress. We think we're all progressing somewhere. Where that's going to end, I've got no idea, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better for most people. You know, the amount of stress that's in the general populace at the moment is enormous, not just because of the lockdown, but because of the general status of our culture, what's going on. You know, people seem to think, but at the same time, people seem to think we're superior to ancient people. I mean, the archaeologists and the anthropologists in particular are scathing about ancient people. They see them as children.
Yeah,
and they see them as, absolutely. I mean, an example is alchemy. Alchemy is seen as a very kind of inept way of manipulating matter to create gold and mercury and things like this. And it's seen as a kind of a precursor to modern chemistry, but they're completely unrelated because they have different perspectives. Modern chemistry is a modern science and only understands things that your senses can perceive. Whereas ancient alchemy is something quite difficult for most modern people to understand because it's non-sensorial. And this is the crucial thing. It's about the instilling of spirit and the instilling of reality, because that's what the reality is. Not that we're, you know, people say, oh yes, we're made of stars, but they're only talking about the physical matter of us. That, you know, there's still, you know, and there's a lot of talk about how science has got similar ideas to kind of religion and some kind of spirituality. That's complete nonsense, because they're looking at two different things from two different perspectives. So, and the ancient spiritual metaphysical way of looking at things is much more all-embracing than our kind of limited perspectives we have now.
Yeah, I see it as alchemy was trying to develop you as a person to evolve, where
Exactly.
science seems to be,
Yeah.
let's just try and live forever.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And of course, you brought up something there, which is a crucial element in this, is that the modern world feels like we have to be active and go out and do things. You know, you have to do things to kind of earn money and kind of live and whatever and eat. And that's not the way traditional cultures see things. I mean, you know, I've got some great quotes relating to that, but I can't find them right now. But the ancient world was much more about contemplating the world. You know, you can achieve as much contemplating the world and the state of things than actually being part of it. And it's another thing you alluded to is the fact that it's an inner thing. This is an inner awareness that one has to kind of achieve. I'm not claiming I've achieved it, but you know, I look at things and, in principles, and it's kind of very difficult to achieve a principle. But you know, I try my best. But you know, being a material person living in the world we do now, we all have to earn our money to live and eat and everything. So we're as much part of the modern world as anything else. But I think it's very interesting, enlightening for me to have a perspective which puts that in place.
Well, that's why I do these shows with yourself and with other people where we discuss this kind of thing, is because we haven't achieved it, but we're working on it and we want to develop. And that's why we want to, you know, discuss it with other people or be there for other people to discuss it with, you know, because there isn't any guidance really out there except for in, you know, I suppose in olden days there'd have been the mystery schools or something to go to.
Well, all the information that has always been is still there, Debbie. I mean, it's in libraries, and nowadays it's all on the net. You can look up the ancient Upanishads. You can look up the ancient Vedic scriptures. You know, within 2 minutes, it's on your screen in front of you. But do people do that? No, I don't think the general populace do that. They're more interested in checking their bank accounts or buying things, whatever people do nowadays. You know, we all do them, but You know, it's I try and spend a little bit of my time actually kind of studying things which are not of the modern world. I suppose I use my computer, that's quite normal. I do my artwork on my computer the last year or so, that's all I've done. So hopefully I'm using the modern world to kind of to give some perspective. I mean, this is the modern world now. I mean, a few years ago, we wouldn't have been able to have this conversation on Zoom. It wouldn't have been possible.
No, we would have had to meet up in this. We'd have had to do a bit of civil disobedience during lockdown and met up and done it.
But yeah, we'd have had to meet up and get a proper camera.
Yeah.
You know, you remember those, don't you? The ones you had to focus.
But it's interesting what you're saying about looking it all up on the computer, because yeah, it's good. Everything is at hand for us now, so we can.
Everything is there. Everything.
It's like it's there for us, where we didn't have to go to the schools or find a teacher, but at the same time, people are looking at it and maybe find it difficult to understand. So they need, you know, not necessarily just my shows, but there's other shows out there that will help someone to look into it or come to you and discuss it with you. But I still know people are looking for a quick fix, where you said something that was very important about looking at something and reading it or contemplating it. It's all about the pondering, isn't it? And letting it come into you, digest.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think Plotinus wrote, who was a Roman philosopher, a couple of hundred AD-ish. He was a Neoplatonist. He was very inspired by Plato. I mean, Neoplatonism was made up in Victorian times as a term to kind of refer to these people, but he wouldn't have considered himself that at all. But he wrote quite a lot about that spiritual study can be just reading and understanding and taking the time to sit quietly and understand the concepts that you're reading about. I mean, it depends what concepts you're reading about. I mean, if you read Plotinus, then the whole universe opens up. Really, he describes things in an incredible way about how we're all manifested from the one, and how that all becomes the circumference, which is our world. And then, you know, I've got an amazing book, Plotinus and the Path to Liberation, which is about the return journey to the one. And this is all the way the ancient people saw the world, you know. And reading a book like that, you can actually understand what he means by having contemplation as being an integral part of what it is to be human. You know, I mean, of course, we're all distracted all the time. There are distractions. That's the nature of the modern world. But it's always very useful and beneficial to spend time contemplating, whether it's on an artwork or whether it's on a piece of writing, or whether it's on just a tree or looking at clouds. I mean, contemplation is the highest. I mean, I know we did a thing on Keith Critchlow, but Keith told me once that the highest human endeavor is to contemplate. And I completely agree with that, totally agree with that. Look at all the old ancient spiritualities. They're all about contemplation. Zen Buddhism and Taoism, they're all about contemplating. So
but for some people that's hard work.
it is hard work. It's very hard work. But I mean, there are books there. I mean, certain writers and certain books have helped me. They pointed me in the right direction. You know, so in particular study of the ancient world for me has been very enlightening, because how do we know where we are unless we know where we've come from? And these aren't really normal studies for most people. I do understand that. You know, I don't have a job where I have to commute and sit in an office all day. You know, I earn my money differently to that. And, you know, I'm thankful for that, because I need that space in order to kind of contemplate in a way.
But then people that do go to the office and don't want to do all this kind of thing, okay, so I'm not saying they're being left behind, but I'm kind of going through a phase of maybe we should just let them do that and just speak to the people that need the help, that need that help.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going to an office, except you don't have the time to contemplate. You don't have the time for much other things. You know, your life is a kind of a big business. And I knew from when I was about 12 that I never wanted to do that. I didn't know why then. I kind of have more of an inkling of why now, but it's taken me 60 years nearly to kind of realize that. But it's yeah, it's a very I mean, you take what you've got, and I wouldn't want to put myself in a situation where I wasn't able to kind of do the things I do now. I feel I have great freedom, you know, to be able to contemplate and to be able to kind of study certain things. So, and I don't think I'm normal in any sense of the term that most people nowadays would think of it. I don't have a normal life, you know, I don't kind of do normal things. And so it's a very difficult thing to talk to most people, because you can upset a lot of people by, you know, rocking their boat. And, you know, I think we just try and be who we are, don't we? We try and go the path that we think we should be on.
But this is one of the problems of doing that, is the normal people don't like it because they want to put us into a different box, and we're quite, we don't fit into boxes. We're unpredictable.
No.
And they don't like it. And it's okay to be like that. It's all right to be different.
Absolutely, yeah.
We don't have to
There's all
follow the
sorts
rat
of different
race.
people. That's fine. Yeah. Just allow me to be me. I'm sure you feel the same. Yeah.
But I was wondering if this is what we were getting at, about how the problem is with normal people today. I hate to say the word problem, and that we're not allowed. People don't want us to be like that. So is this why we're going downhill, like the human race as a per se?
Well, I think this is something outside an individual's kind of perspective, particularly. You know, the nature of the world is in a big part of the great cosmic cycle, that we're just a tiny part of it. You know, how can a scientist coming up with ideas, for instance, I don't know, evolution, you know, I'm not going to comment on that, but you know, how can a scientist at this part of the spiral be aware of everything else that's below him? You know, that doesn't really kind of make sense to me. The main problem nowadays is that people perceive things through their own feelings, and feelings are increasingly, now this might be quite revolutionary, but feelings, emotion and sentimentality have become quite an obsession for a lot of people, whereas in the past it was seen as there was much more of a balanced perspective of these things, and they were higher things for people to concentrate on. And sentimentality in particular, because we can see the degradation of art becoming more sentimental. You know, we can see how I mean, the whole notion of abstract symbolism in the ancient world then becoming represented by the human being in a sentimental way. You go into any church, a Catholic church, and you see Christ there as a person, and it's supposed to bring out the emotions and the sentimentality of how awful life is, and the pain and the death and everything. This is just our way of looking at it now, but in the past things were much more of an abstract symbolism. I mean, you look at the ancient art in Britain, in Ireland, on stones, which are circles, triangles, radiating lines out from a center. This is what the ancient mankind thought of as being reality. This is how they perceived the world. They didn't perceive a dog as a dog. Of course, a dog has always been a dog, but the way you perceive a dog, way you draw a dog, has not always been literal, because they've always been more interested in other things. The literal part of it is the most uninteresting part of it, and it involves emotions and sentimentality, which are probably the lowest of all human qualities, really. That might be quite revolutionary to a lot of people. A lot of people kind of live in an emotional world and a sentimental world, you know. I think this is something that I've actually fought against. I've wanted to kind of strive for something that actually makes more sense than something subjective. I wanted to find something that was much more objective. And for that, I've had to look at ancient civilizations, ancient art, traditional art, a traditional metaphysical symbolism. I mean, one thing we've lost completely is our sense of the metaphysics. So, and because it's non-sensorial, metaphysics is beyond physics, so we can't see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, whatever. People don't think it exists. So those ideas have been replaced by an inward kind of personal sentiment, where it's kind of like the opposite of metaphysics. And for me, it doesn't go anywhere. You know, it doesn't go anywhere at all. I mean, there are reasons why that happened. I mean, I read a lot of one of the writers that's inspired me quite a lot is Guenon, who I've talked about before. He talks about how sentimentality goes hand in hand with materiality, and how the world nowadays has become much more material in a literal sense, as well as us. And sentimentality is kind of a way of kind of balancing that out in ourselves. But see, sentimentality is about our own inner world, emotions and things like this. It doesn't relate at all to anything spiritual whatsoever. I mean, there's, you know.
So if it's not doing that, that's that person who's not relating, is not relating to the world and to the rest of the world around.
Not in a truly holistic way, no. They're relating to the world through their own perspectives. And, you know, the individual is not qualified for that. I'm not qualified for that. You're not qualified for that. We're not part of an integral traditional culture which allows people to perceive things in a holistic way, in a metaphysical way, in a way that relates to the reality of things outside ourselves. We see things emotionally, and we see things all boxed in, symbolically I'm talking about. We don't perceive things the way ancient civilizations perceive things. I mean, look at the way the North American natives perceive nature. I mean, they didn't perceive it as this is a thing. This is what it means to me. Oh, isn't that flower lovely? Ah, you know, that's not how they perceived things. They saw things as not just, of course they saw things as real, as material objects, but these material objects had a metaphysical significance. And that's what we've lost now. It's kind of everything we see now is like a husk of what it was. I'm not talking about individuals, because individuals can see that, but I'm generally talking about our culture as a whole. And this is a big part of kind of a lot of what I kind of concentrate on in my art as well, because I attempt to kind of show what the world would be like if you kind of loosened those chords of the modern world and tried to look at things through a metaphysical perspective, which is the reality of the world around us. Do we believe we're just animals, you know, just groping around in the dirt for food, or do we believe we're descended from, well, okay, you could say heaven, you could say God. I don't use these terms. Are we descended from a metaphysical reality? Well, I believe we are, but our culture is not orientated towards that at all. But ancient cultures were.
Yeah, because it's kind of like in the past they would discuss going back to your ancestors or going back to the gods, where nowadays people don't talk about that. Many people just say, I'm dead, you know, and it's like, you don't know that for sure. But if you're looking into these things, that might start making you look at yourself differently and then the world differently.
Exactly. If these things gradually kind of turned around, and I mean, they will eventually turn around, because you know, if we're at the end of this cycle, the whole nature of the cycle is that we'll start another cycle. Well, not we, but you know, the universe will start another cycle, and we'll be long gone, I'm sure. I don't know whether we'll see the end of this phase, because it seems to be getting worse. But yeah, I mean, cycles inherently start again. I actually don't see it as a cycle. You never come back to the same place. It's more of a spiral. And it's not ascending, because there's no notion of up or down. We're not talking about any spatial reference here. So it's an abstract spiral, and instead of seeing it as A, B, C, D from from beginning to end, you're seeing everything instantaneously. That's how the spiral should be envisaged. Now, of course, that's a metaphysical way of trying to envisage things, and it can't possibly be understood by me. You know, how can you understand a non-three-dimensional, because 3 dimensions is our world. Of course, the metaphysical world doesn't have 3 dimensions. It doesn't have any dimensions. It's beyond dimensions. How can one perceive something that's metaphysical in our world? But it is possible because there are such things as symbols. And symbols are actually, they kind of rupture the world, the material world that we're in, and allow us to perceive. If you've got the eyes to see it, you can perceive, one can perceive the realities of what the symbol is inherently for, which is to connect the material world to the world of the spirit, in a way, the non-material world, the metaphysical world. I mean, there are many examples. There's one I'm going to bring up towards the end of this talk, which is, I was reading a book, Ananda Coomaraswami, who, I mean, I've really just started reading his stuff the last few months. And he's one of the perennialist writers, the traditionalist writers. And he's got a really fascinating chapter in that book about folklore, folk art, and how it's a remnant of an ancient, a vastly ancient way of looking at the world, you know. And he's got a representation of 2 objects, which I'm going to show you a bit later. And he poses the question, which one of these do you think is naive? And then he completely turns it around. So the one you think is originally naive, you think is a metaphysical, you become to realize is a metaphysical representation, whereas the one you thought was a real, you know, that's real art, is actually the naive one. So, and I'll talk about that a bit later, because I have to show you the pictures. So
because that's come from the chapter, what was it, primitive, I forgot.
Yeah, primitive mentality. I mean, you know, I have a slightly suspect use of the word primitive. I prefer the word primal. Primitive just seems to give the connotations of being inferior. And I think it was the time that he was writing that. He was writing that in the 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
And he was using the terminology of the time. And I don't really like the word primitive, because it does mean there's some sort of inferiority going on with us. But that's not the way he's talking about them. He's talking about them actually being superior, because they have a much vaster, more holistic way of looking at the world. So
because he discusses about how all the folk would, like the tribe or whatever, would be all together in this understanding, but where now,
well, this is a big thing that gives us a perspective on the modern world as well, because in an ancient culture, you would have thought that people wouldn't have had the freedom, because there would have been an overarching guideline of people's lives. People would have fitted into that, and they would have seen their place in it. I mean, and that kind of makes us think, because we're obsessed nowadays with the individual perspective, that makes us think the individual didn't have any will, but that's not actually the case, because those structures, those logical structures of order, allow people to kind of go beyond any notion of individuality, not just to be restricted by it. That's what's the crucial thing about traditional cultures, is that it's the opposite of what you might think. If you think of the modern world, we're much more regimented. The whole notion of education wants to kind of homogenize everything. Everybody gets the same, you know, even buying a burger somewhere, you can buy it anywhere in the world, and it's exactly the same. You know, we kind of pride ourselves on being able to do that. But that's not the natural order of things. The natural order of things is not about uniformity in the world. It's about the differences in people, and, you know, living within a culture which allows us to be ourselves. I mean, I don't believe part of the problem, and go back to the initial thing we were talking about, I don't believe a lot of people in the world now are doing what they would really want to be doing. You know, I mean, but at the same time, the whole consensus in the world is that we're in this kind of idea of progress, and we're supposedly getting better and better and better. I don't believe that it is getting better and better and better. I think it's getting worse and worse and worse. And you know,
I agree with you on that. And I think a lot of that, because I find a lot of people aren't doing what they want to do. And you know, during my life, I've just seen people go off and do the job because they've been told to do it, or because they've got to support their families or whatever, but they're not finding their own inner
financial restriction. A lot of time, occasions people have to do what they're doing because of money.
Yes.
And it's a shame that money is controlling us so much. It really is.
But then there's also the whole point of, like what you were saying about the burger being the same somewhere else than the other side of the world. The people that have started bringing all that kind of thing in, I myself think, are people that are so insecure that they need to make the world safe and secure for themselves by making everything the same everywhere.
Yeah, in an artificial way, I suppose you're right. Or the mentality of, well, specifically America in this case, if you think of McDonald's. Yeah, I mean, look at what's going on in America and the way that America for the last, 60, 70 years has wanted to control everything. Yeah. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. It's just, it's like that.
But it's happening here. I see it in our own country. I used to love going to little villages or seaside towns just to see all the individual shops and things, where now you go to them and it's like, oh my God, it's just like my own town.
Exactly. There are the same shops everywhere nowadays. I know. I mean, this is because of money, and the councils have to earn the money to build the roads or whatever. You know, this is part of the modern world.
Individuals that, you know, to stop us being and thinking for ourselves, doing our own thing. I don't know, but that surely is not human progression, even though they would think it was, because it's keeping everything safe and secure and everyone's the same. So we must.
Yeah, but it's artificial, isn't it? It's artificial and won't last forever because it relies on the companies supplying the lorries and trains with petrol and things. This is not going to go on forever. You know, in the vast scheme of things, the modern world is going to last a very, very short time. And well, hopefully, you know, our culture will realize, I think it's beginning that. It is beginning that. There is a resurgence, at least, of trying to protect the planet and trying to kind of do things like that. Whether it'll work, I don't know. You know, I personally believe it's too late in a lot of cases, but that's for another time to talk about that.
But do you feel the same about, you know, especially in this year where they've been, especially in the UK, we were all being told that us artists must retrain for something else. So it's like they're not just trying to kill the planet, they're trying to kill our artistic temperaments.
Yeah, I just tend to ignore things like that. I don't really have much time for politicians, to be honest. I don't think that relates to any kind of real sense of what is going on in the world. That's part of our problem. You know, the world is not just politics. It's like, you know, politics only relates to now, today. In a week's time, the current politics will be different. You know, we can see that everywhere. We've seen it in Britain. Overnight, the whole politics thing changes. Whereas reality and metaphysical ideas can't change. They are as they are. They're not, there's no possibility of them changing because they don't have that as part of their makeup. That's not, you know, it's not part of the corruptible world. And that is there.
Go on.
No, it's all right. No, it's all right. You say.
The symbology will always continue through. The symbology will never be lost. Well, it might, the meanings might be lost, but that symbology.
Well, it can be veiled. I mean, I think we live in a world now where all the meaning and all the spirituality is veiled from us. And that may be part of a natural cycle. That may be part of the cycle. You know, in the past, like, you know, even looking at the medieval times, everybody had a religious and a spiritual perspective. And, you know, that's seen as a negative thing because they didn't have a choice. But then do we have a choice? Is that any more or less, is that inferior or superior to us?
But
What
was
do you
that,
think?
are you saying because they were like under, like, you know, had to be Catholic or Muslim, whereas we've got the right to be whatever we want, thankfully, in most countries.
Well, that can be positive and negative as well. I'm not thinking that's necessarily positive. You know, I don't believe the individual has any answers to what's going on. The individual is not, doesn't have the capacity. Me as well, you know, and I'm an individual, but we don't have the capacity to understand what is going on, because we're not rooted in that traditional wisdom, which is an overarching thing through the whole of society, which was now kind of, it's being destroyed. And we've forgotten it. And the individual has risen in the last few hundred years because we've forgotten these things that are more important.
So what should people be doing? What would be the next step, or what do you think?
Well, partly, you know, just look at a tree, or just go to the sea and just look at the beach all day long. You know, do something that isn't productive in a material way. Make some art. You know, just sit and do a drawing. It doesn't matter if you're not drawing anything. Don't draw a dog or anything. Just draw what's in your head and what you feel and whatever you want. You know,
Like reconnecting.
yeah,
Might be
people have these
surprised.
feelings. We all have feelings. It's part of our nature. Draw how you perceive the world. I mean, my art in particular is about how I perceive the world. And yeah, I mean, that's, I'll show you some of it later. I mean, one example I wanted to talk about is the how the perspective of the modern world is different to the ancient world. Is that the Coomaraswami talks a lot about them. No, wait for it. He talks about the metaphysical symbolism of the safety pin. Right, now we think of the safety pin as we do many other objects, but safety pin as an example, as a completely practical object. It binds two materials together. That's the whole point of a safety pin. It has a practical purpose. But the safety pin is not obviously, it isn't a modern invention. So the safety pin has existed for thousands of years as an idea. And it's the idea of a bent pin. A pin is, it's like a descending from heaven, and you've got the hole at the top. Now the hole is the metaphysical, because it's a hole. And so the whole point of a pin is that you're binding things together in the material world, but the meaning of that is that the binding comes from the metaphysical. It comes from heaven, if you like. So now we just see it as a material object that binds two fabrics together. But in the ancient world, it wasn't always like that. It was never like that. Things didn't have a purely practical use. There was always an understanding of what the object means rather than just its practical purpose. And that's something we've lost. And the safety pin, I was quite shocked when I was reading about the safety pin, because it's such like what we think of as a meaningless object. You know, I mean, okay, I'm fiddling with a peg here because it just happened to be on my floor. A peg is probably a very similar thing. You know, you've got the duality, you've got a pivot point, you've got a clasp, and you've got, I mean, it's full of metaphysical symbolism. And I'm going to start looking at all sorts of things now, you know, but that's the kind of perspective that the modern world has lost, is the idea that things are not just about their practical purpose. It's about what the object means. And another, you know, what it means. What does that mean?
Things have more than one meaning. It's not just the practical meaning.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
the meaning.
Yeah. It's almost like the modern mind can only cope with one meaning at any one time, whereas the ancient mind, the traditional mind, can have these things in their heads at the same time as using a drawing pin. Not a drawing pin. What did I call it? A safety pin. Sorry, drawing pin. Drawing pin maybe as well.
Yeah.
But they also had in their heads the significance of what they're doing. because, you know, a safety pin is a bent needle pin, and the thread in a needle is actually the thread of spirit that binds things together. That's the whole nature of sewing. That's the whole symbolism of sewing. It's not just about an object. It's about the whole nature and the symbolism of what you're doing. And all arts and crafts are like that. They all had an ancient metaphysical symbolism, which has not gone. We just don't perceive it anymore. We just see it as a practical thing. So art has that purpose, you know, even digging a hole has a purpose, climbing a tree. You know, these aren't just things, you know, you're not just climbing up a tree to grab the fruit. You're seeing that as, you know, you're ascending the ladder towards heaven. And, you know, I mean, there's so many things like that. I mean, it's very difficult to concentrate on anything and to talk about anything in particular, because the whole world is about that, you know, and it just shows how much limited vision us as modern human beings have, because we don't perceive that at all. Everything you can think of has a metaphysical significance. Otherwise, it would not exist.
So we need to have that deeper looking in so that we can get the deeper
Exactly.
into ourselves
Even the
as well.
simplest of things, like safety pin, has a metaphysical significance. You know, think of the symbolism of weaving and the symbolism of sewing and the interlaced work of Islamic pattern, which is actually kind of like weaving in a lot of cases. This is, you know, the Islamic pattern in particular. Okay, it isn't, and there's a lot of people I know and a lot of people who study this who believe the same thing. It's not just decoration. It's not just making pretty patterns. It has significance. And the significance of the weaving is one of those ideas. So, you know, you're weaving,
actually doing it, making
yeah,
that piece.
yeah, and to actually do it is a way of contemplating the nature of the world, rather than we feel we have to grab everything, we need everything, we want everything. There's no contemplation of something. I mean, just like you can contemplate a piece of writing or a safety pin, you can contemplate an artwork, even a pattern or a tree. And this all has inherent metaphysical meaning.
And you've got some arts, did you say, we're going to look at to discuss? Do you want to get to that?
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to bring up just before I'm going to show you some art is, well, it's kind of, it was a bridal attachment. Shall I show you that now?
Yeah, so this is for a
I
horse.
share the screen now. I share the screen now.
Go for that. So we're talking about bridal attachment for a horse here, and we're going to go through descriptions of that.
So this is a bridal attachment for a horse. It's Sarmatian. Now, you may not know who the Sarmatians are, but they were one of the civilizations, roughly, they were around at the Roman Empire time, 400 or 500 BC to 400 or 500 AD. And they were a very successful culture. In the place of where roughly Ukraine, going down through Iran, even, I mean, they came from nomadic peoples that are in Western China, but they were white. They had completely Caucasian features, which is interesting. Not that that's particularly relevant, they were just people.
Well, were they red-headed? Some people like red-haired.
Some people say they were red-haired, yeah, some people say they were red-haired. There's one thing, I'm going to talk about this, but I'm going to show you the next one. Now, this is we only know about the Sarmatians because the Romans and the Greeks wrote about them. We don't know anything from them. Now, who do you think this person is? This is a Greek vase, and it's depicting a Sarmatian warrior.
Oh, I was going to say Hercules then, but
no, it's a female.
Oh, is it?
That is a female warrior. The thing is about the Sarmatians, they elevated women much higher. Well, we know from the Greeks, they elevated women much higher than the Greeks at the time. So, and this is where we get the word Amazon from, which is a Greek thing. A meaning without, and mazos meaning breast. Because what they apparently used to do is that, this is a Greek story, is that they cut off their right breast so they could hold the strap which held their sword. And if you have a look at the drawing there, not a drawing.
Yeah, now I've got my glasses on, I can see her feminine face.
You can see there's something going across her right breast.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's a Greek story. Whether that's true, I don't know. But also, interestingly, it's a little kind of side tangent, is that Wonder Woman is a Sarmatian warrior. I just thought I'd throw this in. So you're looking at, yeah, exactly. You're looking at a Greek version of the original Wonder Woman there. Okay. So, and they did have ropes, as Wonder Woman does. I mean, of course, the modern Wonder Woman is nothing whatsoever to do with any historical accuracy. But that is the original
Wonder Woman. Ropes make people speak the truth.
Exactly. That, yeah, well. So anyway, we'll go back to that. Okay. And this is Sarmatian ornament for a bridal thing. I think the question mark at the bottom there is not to do with the Sarmatian, it's to do with the ornament, right. Because he's questioning the nature of what an ornament is. And this is a good example of what I'm talking about. Of course, it had a practical purpose, but the metaphysical symbolism here, the users of this ornament would have known exactly what they were doing. Because we have a wheel in the middle, we have a six-spoked wheel in the middle, and that's similar to the Hindu idea of the wheel rotating. And what we have is four heads of horses. This is what it's described as. Each head also has a wheel. So we have four wheels. So what else has four wheels? A chariot has four wheels. So this is an ancient way of perceiving the sun chariot, if you like, which could be represented by the actual horse. And as the lion can represent the sun, the horse could also represent the sun. So this is something that is actually almost, well, not almost, is a swastika. If you look at each head sticking out, it's coming out and then it's going off at 90 degrees, which is identical to the very, very ancient swastika symbol. Well, that's a whole thing in itself. I can't really get into that now.
We're talking about a swastika symbol that would have been from the past, not what the
it's a very ancient symbol. Yeah,
the original meaning for it.
Yeah, I mean, the swastika is about the center. It's about the turning of materiality around a stable center. And this is essentially what we've got here. So the stable center would be the almost invisible point in the center of the six in the center. And the fact that the four horses are turning, there's a movement, a turning around the stationary center. So this symbolism would have been relevant to the Sarmatians, the people who made and used this. Now we have a bridal thing and it's purely decorative. It doesn't have the significance of what the meaning, the metaphysical meaning of what's going on in this. I don't actually know how large it is. I've just taken this from Coomaraswami's book, but he thanks the British Museum. So I'm thinking it might be in the British Museum. Whether it's on show or not, I don't know. I think only 5 or 10% of their things are actually on show. But I would quite
ask for things from the British Museum and they will send you pictures of them. Like you could send that picture.
Really? Okay. Okay. Well, I would like to get a better view. I mean, if it's on show, I want to go and see it. I'm really intrigued by how large it is. You know, I'm not really sure what it's made of, presumably metal. So, you know, I'm quite interested to see more about this. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, this is also from the Coomaraswami book. It's on the next page to the...
Right, let me get rid of us because we can't see it without pictures there. How do
Okay, I can only see you in the top right-hand corner, but I can't, thank God I can't see myself. Don't want to see myself.
Hide thumbnail video. Hopefully I won't cut us off. Okay, right, okay, that's fine. We can see it now.
Okay, so we've got two depictions of horses here. They're both modern. So, you know, middle of the 20th century, really. Presumably that's a donkey on the right, but essentially the idea is that it's a depiction of horses. What we've got on the left. Now, which of these, I'm asking, you know, I'm not asking you as an individual, I'm just saying, well, which one of these would you consider to be naive? And most people would say the one on the left. And then Coomaraswami talks about how things that I've discussed as well today, about the ancient way of perceiving things, because the left-hand one is folk art. And he talks about how folk art is ancient and metaphysical in nature. So you can see the four-horse chariot. You've got the four wheels, just like the previous swastika. You've got the head. Interestingly, the White Horse of Uffington has a very similar head to the to this horse on the left here. It's an abstract version of it, or what we would consider to be abstract, but actually it's a primal form of what the horse means. It's on wheels, it's moving. To me, it depicts the nature of a horse.
Yes.
But most people would think of that as folk art and naive art, and they would see the realistic horse or donkey on the, well, Coomaraswami terms it bourgeois art. I know what he's talking about, but we wouldn't call it that nowadays. This is the Western influence. These are Indian, and that they were made at the same time. And the horse on the right is it's because of the Western influence in India. They've actually, all they've done is depicted what a horse looks like. That's all they've done. It stops there. There's no significance. There's no metaphysical significance to that. So what Coomaraswami does, he poses the idea which one of these is naive, and everybody's thinking, well, it's the one on the left because it's a simple children's toy. But actually he turns the whole thing around and explains that, well, actually, because it's folk art, it's ancient, thus it has metaphysical significance. And the one on the right, even though it might look more like a donkey, is actually the least like a donkey, because all it's reproducing is what a donkey looks like.
Yeah, just its likeness.
Yeah, just its likeness, not its nature. So, and I found that fascinating, really.
Yes, because the one on the left, like you say, the wheel shows it moves.
Yeah.
It's back for you to sit on or put your luggage on or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's showing its nature of it. Yeah,
it's showing its nature. And the thing about ancient art, because both of these are art, lesser or greater degree, it's art, its purpose is to represent what is. Thou art. What is the nature of this thing? And the nature of things is not just their physical appearance. The nature of things involves a much more complex respect for what the object actually means, not just what it looks like. So, it's interesting how he turns the whole thing round, and you end up thinking, well, the one on the right here is the naive one, because that's made by some person who actually can only see with his eyes and can't actually see any further. So, but the one on the left actually, is actually a different version of this. This is much more ancient, a couple of thousand years older. So you can see how even the children's toy on the left is a bit of a come down from the swastika. But essentially they're trying to depict the nature of what a horse is. So, and it makes me think of going back to what I said about the White Horse of Uffington. That also is not intended to represent a horse visually, because it's an ancient thing. Some people say it's Neolithic, I don't know, but it's very old. So they wouldn't have necessarily had our way of perceiving things. So they wouldn't have represented a horse as a horse. That explains its kind of abstract nature. And the White Horse of Uffington is more like the children's toy on the left than the actual donkey, the more of a realistic version of a horse.
Yes, because many people have said, oh, the White Horse of Uffington, people who perhaps don't understand this, well, it's a horrible thing to say, or don't look into the deeper connotations, often say to me, it's so naive.
Well, exactly. That is exactly the point I'm trying to make here, Debbie.
Yeah.
That what one may first think is naive because it looks simple and childish is actually not naive, because it involves a very profound understanding of symbolism and metaphysics, whereas a realistic version of a horse is actually the really naive one, because it's ignoring everything that a horse is and just looking at its outer appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought that, don't trust the appearance of things. I've said that for many years, and it's taken me a long time to understand what I mean, but don't trust the outer appearance of things, because it fools you. It's almost like the horse on the donkey on the right. It's fooling you. It's telling you this is what a horse is, purely based on what it looks like. But it's not telling you what a horse is at all, because the visual appearance of something does not help you with that at all.
You've got to contemplate what it's trying to
quite
tell
often you meet people who you might trust, and then you regret that, because you're going on the appearance of them. And you don't realize there's other things going on. Anyway, that's a different story.
No, I've been there many times.
yeah, I know. It's a sad thing. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, really, kind of the talk thing is over. I just wanted to end with this kind of comparison of these two different perspectives, and going back to the whole idea of what it is to be human. What is it to be human? What is reality here? Is it to be human just to live and perceive the obvious, or is it human to actually live in the whole height and breadth of the metaphysical world, the whole world of spirit, which is represented here by the children's toy on the left? So this kind of, when I saw this picture, this sums up what we're trying to talk about, really, what I'm trying to kind of get over. So I mean, really, I don't know what else to talk about that other than show you some of my own work.
Well, I was going to say, let's have a look at some of your art, since we're there.
I've got a few here.
You said, I really do. I think it'd be really good for people to be able to look deeper into what they're looking at and why they're looking at certain things, or trying to connect with. Or the advice of going and connecting with the world or something. It will help them look into things deeper.
Yeah, well, I'll enjoy showing you some of my work. I mean, there's a couple at the beginning and maybe done sort of 7 or 8 years ago, but they lead to, I'll show you the first one.
Yep.
So this is, it's just a drawing. It's just graphite. That's all it is. I think there was maybe a little bit of white gouache, but only a small amount. And this is on A1. So basically it's 2.5 feet across by 3.5 feet high. It's quite a large drawing. These took me many months to complete. So the black you see on there is kind of thick graphite, is pencil. And what am I trying to do here? Well, I mean, that's far too much to kind of explain, to make it coherent. But I just want people to look at them and to contemplate. Just see the geometry, see the harmony, and see what's going on in the picture. A lot of it might look like doodles. That doesn't bother me at all. They're not doodles. Everything there is for a specific purpose. I don't know whether you can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Right, I'm going to point in the middle of this circle here. Can you see that circle there? Mm-hmm. This is a particular geometric arrangement of arriving at the size of the Earth with the size of the moon, using the Great Pyramid. And this geometry is inherently part of Stonehenge. You're looking at the geometry behind Stonehenge here. So when people say that, people thought the Earth was flat, complete nonsense. People have known the Earth is a sphere. They've known the moon is a sphere, that it encircles the Earth. They've known all these things for thousands and thousands of years. It's only a modern kind of religious fervor, probably from the symbolism of a flat Earth is interesting. It's about the center. It's not about literally the Earth being flat. Again, don't go by appearance. It's not about the appearance of the Earth being flat. It's about the Earth being at the center. So anyway, there's one thing you can contemplate. So there's a lot of stuff here. So that was sorry, Debbie?
Quite like a doorway. So people could...
Yeah, I'm really interested in the idea of portals and entrances, and it is a doorway or a portal, if you like. It's up to the individual where that leads.
Portals and doorways, contemplating on this kind of thing, for some reason, inside our minds starts getting us thinking in should I say, a different way.
Well, that's kind of my reason for doing this, really. It's really about me. It's to help me think that way. I'm really not doing these for anyone else. I'm doing them for me. I'm not doing them
As
for
a true
people.
artist does.
Well, exactly. And I'm certainly not doing them so people kind of to elevate myself. I'm not doing that at all. They're objects for me in order. It's like what I was talking about Plotinus about reading, is that you can contemplate when you're reading things, and you can have a kind of a metaphysical realization. I kind of went through various things like that when I was making this artwork. So that for me personally, they were enormously beneficial. So this is sort of a year or two later. This is a kind of a coloured version. I started using watercolour and gouache. Essentially, it's the same idea. Again, the geometry there is it all means something. None of it is irrelevant. This bit here, the two rows of 6 small circles, this actually has to do with the Nap of Hauer and the book I wrote on it. But I won't go into that now. That's so, I mean, this was work I was doing 7 or 8 years ago. About 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of stopped doing this kind of work. And more recently, I've been using this old work in my more recent work, which I've only been doing for about exactly a year now. And they're digital works.
Yeah, I love them. I've been watching all these on your Facebook page.
Yeah, I put some on there. You'll probably see some you haven't seen.
Yeah. Oh, good.
You know, these are digital works. Okay, I do them on my computer, but I'm using my old work to copy onto photographs to kind of blend the two. And doorways, again, it's a doorway. I'm really interested in the sun as a symbol of the center. I don't mean the center of the solar system, because that doesn't really matter. The sun itself the solar system is moving around another center. It's a relative center. But what I'm trying to refer to, the sun has always been representative of the heart within us. That's why the sun is really central, because it represents our inner heart. And so I'm still, I'm using these as objects to contemplate on. So, but it blended with my own photography. This is a place called West Beach on the south coast of England.
But it all goes so well together. The photography, the symbolism,
so? Yeah. Well, I hope so. I hope so. And there have been a few unsuccessful ones, but some of them. This is actually a reworked one from one I did in the springtime, I think. I've kind of done a lot more work on it the last few days, and you compare the two. This is much better. So anyway, we'll move on to the next one. So again, it's the same idea where I'm applying my older work to more recent photography. This was actually a photograph I took of Callanish 3. It's not of the main stones at Callanish. It's of a smaller stone circle. It's within viewing of the main Callanish stones we all know and love. Most people don't really know of these other Callanish, but there's probably a dozen other stone circles within a couple of miles of the main stones that are famous, and this is one of them. So again, what's the doorway? The doorway for me is the sun, because it's our heart, and it's about an inner awareness.
Well, I study Gurdjieff, and he says it's better to be burnt by the sun than eaten raw by the moon. So he's saying,
oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Attaining to become solar people.
Yeah.
Not imaginary lunar.
Because the moon is a reflection of the sun in a way. The light we get from the moon is fake. It's not from the moon. It's from somewhere else.
Yeah. Which is why it's fine to be out in the moonlight, because you're still getting the solar rays. Even though
it's beautiful. Diminished. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, well, where I live here, I live on a boat on a canal, and every night I see the moon. I mean, I'm facing just the right direction, admittedly, but I see everything rise right in front of me. I'm facing southeast. So everything comes up, and the moon is incredible because I see it reflected in the water. And Just some amazing views at any
I
time
try
of
and
the
go
day.
and see it every night, and I've been watching Orion rise. The last
Oh
few
yeah.
days, it's been at different times. I have to keep trying to figure out when it's going to be to get out there for it.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah. Well,
it got
that's coming
cloudy
up
over
now
the
in
weekend.
the winter. Yeah. The summer triangle's going and Orion's coming up. So this is a stone circle in North Wales. I took a photograph of called Multi Uchaf. Again, I went there because Keith Critchlow wrote about it. And when I first met him, he suggested I would go there for a good few days. So 3 of us went there. This photograph's taken a lot later from when I first went there, but I'm again using the sun. There's always sun and sunlight and reflections and things. So again, it's a doorway.
It's beautiful with the mountains in the background. So what's this stone circle called again?
Moel Ty Uchaf, which actually is it's Welsh, and it means hill on the highest house, or house on the highest hill, rather.
I think I've been to that one.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating one because it's the only one that's a pentagon. And it was, yeah, I mean, it's the only one that is, it's a compound ring and it's a pentagon. It's very difficult to perceive that once you're there, but if you see it from above, even have a look on Google Earth, put in Moel, M-O-E-L, and then T-Y, and then U-C-H-A-F, Moel Ty Uchaf, house on the highest hill. And it's not on the highest hill, there are mountains all around it, which are higher. But Alexander Thom, in his Megalithic Sites in Britain, published in '67, was the first person to analyze this circle. And it's all based on megalithic yards of a certain diameter and a pentagon. It is a pentagon. So, and it's orientated to the north. One of the points is north.
Okay, that's why I know the name of it, because I've been reading chapters, and it's on my YouTube channel, from the Moon book, not the one you've just said, the other one he did on lunar observatories.
Oh yeah, megalithic universe. Yeah, I don't have that one. I don't think I've ever read that one. Yeah,
very hard to get. Yes.
Does he talk a lot about Scottish circles in that? Because a lot of those are to do with the moon. Yeah.
His whole last chapter that I've read, that I've recently put online, is all about all that area around Arran and all that area and how they're all linked. Okay, yeah, very good.
Wow. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, these are the main Callanish stones, and I don't know. I don't think this is 100%
through on this one. I really do.
Yeah, it's like you're looking through some kind of mesh or something, which I kind of, I'm not sure if this is 100% successful. It's a bit obvious. I like it when they're a little bit more subtle. But you see, I've got 2 suns here. So I've got the real sun. Well, not the real sun. The sun we see in the sky is the lower one, because its light is reflecting off the clouds. But the spiritual sun is the one above. And I'm not referring to this second sun that some people claim is there. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the metaphysical, what the sun means. You've got the appearance of the sun, and then you've got what the sun is at the top. So you've got both suns there. So anyway, I mean, it's
in the Egyptian times, Akhenaten, even though everyone says, oh, he was a sun worshipper, he used to say he worships the sun that's behind the sun, which I think
there you
you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a culture which was fully aware of these ideas. Absolutely. So also the space here that the upper sun is in, it's interesting because this comes up in the next picture, and it's to do with a childhood dream I had. When I was 12, 13 and 14, I mean, it's very bizarre when I think about it now. I had a dream on Christmas Eve for 3 years running, exactly the same dream. Now, Christmas Eve, I mean, bizarre, I know. What it was is I was walking along in a darkened field, and there was a fence either side of me, and up ahead I could see a little village, which is kind of represented by what some people think is a stone circle here, but that's actually a little village. This is actually the original drawing. This is tiny. This is this whole central circle, you see, this whole thing here is probably about 1.5 inches across in the actual drawing. So I've photographed it and applied it to this. So, and what happened in my dream is that it was at night time. and the sky split open in front of me, and angels came out. One was blowing a trumpet, one was blowing a harp, the other one was singing. I mean, it sounds bizarre now, but I absolutely distinctly remember it. And my mum refers to it often. She says, do you remember that dream you had for 3 years running on the same night? And it's like, I've forgotten all about it for many years. And then she reminded me, and I did this drawing about it, because this little spot in the middle is the sky splitting open. And then there's no angels there, but I mean, this is tiny, that's tiny. So I call this picture Childhood Dream. Again, it's a doorway. I mean, the whole thing about dreams is a fascinating, if there's a metaphysical significance at all, whether it's to do with us. I'm not, I'm not willing to kind of talk about it because it's far too big to get into right now. But this is based on a childhood dream I had when I was a young teenager, and I had it on the same night, 3 years running.
Yes, and at a special time of year as well.
At a special time of year, yeah, it's very odd. So, okay, kind of a similar idea. I mean, the center is going to have got a crucifix in the center. This is possibly, I don't see this as particularly Christian. I mean, the cross is not particularly Christian at all. It's in every culture and every religion has the cross. But I call this Pleiades because the Pleiades are at the top. You see at the top here, yeah. This is the Pleiades. So, and this is another reworked one where everything's encircling around the doorway. And this color wheel inside, I actually took from a Johann Itten book of his color theory. I don't know whether you know Johann Itten. He was a Swiss or German artist. He was part of the Bauhaus, and he wrote the seminal book on color theory. And when I was learning the basics of color theory, when I was on my foundation in '79 and 1980, I really love that book. It's absolutely, I recommend it to anyone. It's just a phenomenal book on color.
How do you spell his last name?
Johann. Yep. Johannes, Itten, Itten.
Oh,
Johann Itten.
Right. Okay.
Look up the Bauhaus, you'll see his name. He'll be on Wikipedia. But I recommend any artist who doesn't know this should know Johann Itten's book on color theory. So now you notice I use a kind of lot of ancient sites photography here. It's just, I mean, Sophia Hill is only kind of 40 miles away from me here, less than that, I think. So I can be there in 2 hours and an hour and a half in my car. And I go to it 3 or 4 times a year. I go to West Kennet, Longbarrow, and I visit Avebury very regularly. In fact, we met there recently, didn't we, Debbie? You were there.
Yeah, little show that we did there.
Yeah, and do you remember me saying when we walked up to Swallowhead Spring, and I pointed over and I said, last time I was here, that ditch was covered in walls, full of water.
And there it is.
This is the photograph I took with a watery ditch in front with the reflected icosahedron.
So the little river's behind us in this picture.
Yeah, the river, the water you see in the bottom there is just a wet ditch. The actual River Kennet is behind us. Right. But the River Winterbourne is between our view here and the Silbury Hill. It's interesting.
A little show about this, which is on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things that we talked about was that it's the only river in the world which changes its name because a spring enters it. Because before the spring, called Swallowhead Spring, is called the Winterbourne, and then because of the spring, it becomes the Kennet. I won't go into what the Kennet means, but you can look up the other video.
Yeah, and but you're all in there. Go and watch our other shows.
Yeah. So, right, they're all doorways, I suppose. I suppose I should just admit it. They're all doorways. There's 2 suns again. There's 2 gateways to each sun. And yeah, I took this photograph. The dark hills you see there is Gower, the Gower Peninsula from Pembrey Beach. I mean, that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. It's just what it is.
But this one's also a rework. that, you know, it is important that it is in there.
Sorry, say that again.
It's got the connection with the nature of.
Oh, I think the earth is very important. I mean, my work is about the vertical. There's always vertical things, but every work has a horizontal, because, you know, otherwise there's no balance. So you've got the crossing of the spiritual vertical with the material horizontal, if you like. The dark hills of Western Gower.
And in our normal lives, we're on the horizontal, but trying to be spiritual, we're going.
Well, really, we should be in the middle with an awareness. We live in the horizontal as material beings, but we also live in the center because we're also metaphysical spiritual beings. So this is it's kind of my attempt to kind of contemplate it and to kind of activate something in myself. Like we've talked about earlier, it's all an inner thing. You know, it's all about contemplation. So again, you've got the horizontal and you've got the vertical. This is another reworked one.
So the 6 star.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the Sarmatian bridal ornament. That this is a little, interestingly, the actual Islamic pattern there is a little painting I did about 35 years ago on a piece of slate, which is about 2 inches long. And I just painted just completely freehand. This is why it's not accurate. I painted it with acrylic paint on the piece of slate, and just took a photograph of it and thought that it would work. And of course, you know, with all the kind of software that I use on my computer, I can reflect it. I can have multiple layers. So the computer gives me the freedom to create this work.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Okay, not many more left.
That's okay. I always like looking at your art, so it's fine with me.
Thank you. Well, actually, I've got there's a website called saatchiart.com, and I sold this as a print. My work's available as prints, and I sell them. And this one actually sold on Saatchi Art, which I was quite surprised. Somebody in Canada bought it. I only posted it off yesterday when it was picked up. But the funny thing is with Saatchi Art, they pay quite a lot of money. Whereas if you go to my website, it's half the cost of Saatchi Art. So I didn't have the heart to send him my my web address, because he would have got a bit annoyed. Anyway,
if you're well off, go to Saatchi Art to buy Nick's work.
If you're well off, go to Saatchi Art, look up my name, or if you're not well off, you can look up my website where all this work is available, and more than this. You know, I think I've done about 140 or so. This is just a small example.
What's the next one?
Right, Ring of Brodgar.
Yeah, nice.
So again, I've got the whole idea that the sun that we see in the sky is behind the stone, but actually the real heart is the sun that's higher up, which is causing the shadow.
I've never been to Brodgar. One day.
Oh, it's fabulous. I've been there. Yeah, I've been there like 3-4 times, because I run tours to Orkney, which didn't happen this year, but hopefully it will next year. But this is one site we go to, and I love the whole Orkney thing. Well, I wrote my book on one of the sites on a remote island, not on the main island of Orkney. So it's not really known about the site as much as somewhere like Skara Brae, which is much more famous.
And your tours will be available on your website as well, won't they?
What's that? Sorry, Debbie?
Details for your tours will be on your website.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's much on my website actually, but if you're interested in going to Orkney next August, we're running a tour next August, go to, well, just get in touch with me and I can point you in the right direction. I don't have anything on my website, but I do it with Megalithomania. So you could go straight to Megalithomania and look up their tours and look up Orkney, or if you just Google Orkney tour Megalithomania 2021, you'll get all the information, and you'll see the incredible itinerary that we've worked out. We were there for kind of 7 or 8 days, and we hired 2 vans, 2 minibuses, and we see everything that's possible for us to see in 7 days. We had a fabulous time in last year. It was absolutely fabulous. So this is a crop circle that I visited in July. It's very near Stonehenge. Actually, behind us, behind where I was standing, is Stonehenge, although it's not visible from the crop circle. So, and my point here is that not that UFOs create stone circles. I mean, you can believe what you like. I don't believe that, but I'm using the crop circle as a template for the material world because it's a horizontal thing. So the nature of the horizontal world is the spiritual sun, which the metaphysical sun. Again, there's two suns in the sky. So, you know, I mean, you can look at it how you like. I don't mind how you look at it. But the intention is always a personal thing for me. So what I'm actually trying to kind of communicate is actually kind of quite subtle and not obvious. So I'm not saying that kind of some psychic element here is creating the crop circle or it's a UFO. I'm talking about the metaphysical creation of the material world from a representation of the metaphysical, which is the kind of the sun in the sky. Okay, this is the last one I have here. So again, it's the same photograph, just treated in a different way with different clouds and again with the sky, the sun rather.
So did you go to see this crop circle after you and me met up at Avebury?
When did we meet up, Debbie? What month was that?
July.
Well, it was about the same time. I can't remember when in July, but I met a friend here who lives very close. He lives in virtually the closest house to Stonehenge. And he took me to see this crop circle. It was the only one I visited this year, actually.
The reason I ask is because the day after we met in Avebury, I then got taken the next day to a crop circle in Avebury area.
That's right. I remember you saying, yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? You know, I can't recall if this. I have a memory of it being perhaps after we met in Avebury, but I really can't remember. I could look up when the photograph was taken and let you know.
But I love the sunny sky, the blue sky, and then the contrast of the golden corn.
Yeah, yeah. Really, I mean, that's the Johannes Itten influence of the color theory. Blue and orange are complementary and opposing colors, so they go together. So I'm always aware of the practicalities in art. You know, it has to work as a picture, whereas the symbolism and what it actually means is actually something beyond what it actually is. I mean, it's not represented by the colors particularly. It's represented by what the sun means at the top and the fact that the sunlight is in the material world because of this source. I mean, interestingly, that, you know, if we go back to the previous one, now that's the same photograph of the stone circle. It's exactly the same photograph. Look at the trees on the horizon and the clouds. You see, this is what Photoshop can help me with. It can help me with like adding another sky. I can move clouds, and it gives me enormous freedom to kind of do what I think would work.
Yeah, the color depth is much deeper in this one. Yes, there's something about it, isn't it?
Yeah, there's something about that sky that kind of works. I mean, I may have taken that photograph somewhere else a couple of months later. I don't think that was a photograph of the sky above the crop circle, but it kind of works. It works for me as an image. So a photographer friend of mine said this is one of the most successful that I've done. In his opinion, this was one of the most successful I've done, because I'm quite pleased with it because it's quite minimal. It's not overworked too much.
Yeah, and there's something about that cloud in the middle that's quite mystical.
Yeah.
It just all works, doesn't it? He's right. It all works.
Yeah, I mean the symmetry of it. I mean, all this work I've showed you here is symmetrical. If the left is very similar to the right, to a large degree, and this is another example. So that's the last one. So
Oh,
shall I come out of that and
that's
we'll
share. Yes, please. Thank you. They were fantastic to look at. I really do enjoy your work. I keep up with you obviously on Facebook, and we're friends anyway, so I get to see your work. But for other people, that they can come to you on your Facebook page to look, or go to your website, which is called
it's ncope.co.uk. So www.ncope.co.uk. Go to my website and have a look. And you can email me from there. If you go to the contacts page, you can click on the email button. There's an email button at the top, and you can inquire and ask me about anything. And
yeah, you're very approachable.
oh, I'm really approachable. I'm actually quite it's
Well, it's handy because some people do want to ask questions, and they, it stops you when you think, oh, maybe this person won't reply, or maybe I'll make a fool of myself. But we're both approachable people.
No, absolutely. I do reply to everything. I get quite a few emails inquiring about my artwork and all sorts of things. I get quite a lot actually. I get a couple a week asking about my book, which is unfortunately not available. It's sold out. I mean, I have half a dozen copies. I'm really keeping hold of those because they're all signed by me and Keith Critchlow, and maybe one day they might be worth something. No, probably not.
Would
But
they
I'm hoping it'll be
the publishers.
well, I'm hoping there'll be another edition of it. I mean, all it would take is for them to get it printed, but it'll cost them a little bit of money. But maybe one day it'll all be. I did hear. I mean, Keith passed away early this year, so that's probably held things up. But that's a minor thing in the big scheme of things, my book. But I did hear him talking. He did talk to me about a publisher in America that wanted to do re-editions of all his works, of all his books. And that would have included any book that he had anything to do with, including my book with him. So I wouldn't earn any money from it. And so you never know. I mean, Keith Critchlow was a big name, and he was a very, very important person, as we've discussed before. And I was really honored to have collaborated on a book with Keith. So he was an incredible man.
We did a show on him, so if anyone's interested in his work, just again go through the YouTube. I'll put a link here if I remember. I can be a bit forgetful on that kind of thing, but we are going to put a list of books that you recommend in the comments, aren't we?
Yes, we are
today.
It's books that have inspired me. There's books I've been reading for maybe 35 years. Some of the Guenon books I first read in the late 80s, early 90s. And they're books that have inspired me and have shown me things which help me contemplate the nature of the world, the way it is. And the book at the top of my list is probably the most important one. So I won't go into it. I'll tell you what it is now. You just read the reading list. And you're quite welcome to kind of buy any of these books. They should all be available nowadays, and they're all kind of very, very interesting books.
And you will find some are available as PDFs, because that's how I found some of them in the past.
You might do. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose that's the cheapest way of reading a book, isn't it? I found a book. I found a good article by Coomaraswami actually as a PDF, which is about something I'm very interested in, to do with metaphysics. He wrote a book on it. So it's one of Guenon's themes and Schuon's themes. So I might actually kind of read a bit of that tonight.
Well, I would like to thank you very much, Neil. That's been a really fascinating talk. It's lovely as always to see your artwork.
Well, it's a good chance to chat about nonsense and talk about things. I hope some people find it interesting, I did feel I waffled on a bit, but it
is something people need to discuss, or like we were saying earlier, that people that are wanting to find more meaning to their lives, hopefully this talk will help them with that and perhaps point them into some nice new directions.
Yeah, you never know. I think my books will do a better job at it, though. The books that I'm recommending will do a better job than I will. They're much more qualified to do it. So,
well, thank you very much, Nick, and until next time.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, everyone.
It was really good. I enjoyed it.